Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead review. So here's my review for episode 2 of season 4. Really incredible episode. This one was primarily focused on, I guess, everybody in the prison getting sick, and there was a lot of Rick realizing that, yeah, he can't really hold on to the old world anymore. Like, I know he's been trying to do that a lot here, but it seems like everything that he's trying to build is just falling apart because he just can't really hold on to those things anymore. But more than that, there's a lot of stuff, first of all, with Michonne and a foreshadowing of her future. There's some stuff here with Carol as well. Like, I would say throughout the first 2 episodes, the 2 main characters so far are Rick and Carol for sure, because Rick, obviously, he's the lead of the show, but Carol definitely is, I would say, second, because she has a lot of storylines here. So obviously, before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I don't have to warn anybody for spoilers, but yeah, definitely that ending scene with Karen and David makes me really excited to watch episode 3, so expect my breakdown for that tomorrow, as well as my episode 4 breakdown the day after that, and then episode 5 the day after that. So yeah, we're gonna keep going here all the way throughout all of season 4, and yeah, we'll just kind of take it from there. The episode starts with somebody feeding rats to the walkers, and that was a whole question we had all season was, you know, who was doing that. And I remember back in the day when that first happened, I thought it was another villain, and when it was revealed later on that it was just Lizzie doing that, I honestly was definitely really upset with that, because it was not the biggest reveal, and I didn't even catch it actually the first time I watched it. Like, the first time I ever watched it, because I watched it live on TV. I didn't even catch that line was said. They talked about it, I think, on Talking Dead afterwards or something, and then I was like, oh, really? Like, that's all it was? Like, I wasn't the biggest fan, but looking back now, it actually makes a lot of sense, and, you know, they're seeing these rats everywhere, right? And so, but, I mean, obviously, back then you think it's like a bigger villain or this and that, so you think it's going somewhere else, but the fact they foreshadowed a lot of this, there's a lot of talk and focus on Lizzie specifically in this episode. A lot of, you know, first of all, the line, look at the flowers, happens in this episode. And so there's some teasers and setup here for what's to happen in season 4, episode 14, right? So, yeah, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, Tyrese and Karen, you know, they're sort of talking and hanging out. And yeah, whenever there's a happy scene and it starts off that way, you just know that it's going to result in a death. Like, that's just, I think, pretty obvious at this point, right? Like, it's going to result in a death, and that's exactly what happens at the end of the episode, right? Karen and David are actually dead at the very end, and we know who did it. I mean, obviously, the next episode, there's a lot of wondering, you know, about who did it, but yeah, we'll talk about that once we actually get there. Walkers are starting to kill other people inside the cells now. Obviously, we saw at the end of the last episode that one walker was starting to kill people, and so now there's more walkers in this cell block here. And the next morning, no one's noticed yet. I was so surprised by that. Like, I totally forgot about how all this plays out. Like, I was just like, wait, it's the next morning, and no one has noticed that the walkers are, like, everywhere. But I guess it was just, like, that quiet, and that one walker did just, like, sit in that one room for a long time. So I guess it makes sense. They are kind of in different cell blocks, but kind of in the same area. So, yeah, I guess no one just noticed right away, because, I mean, they eventually noticed that morning. It's just that it wasn't, like, right away, right? Carl asks Rick if he can have his gun back, and Rick at this point is just kind of ignoring him, because obviously to Rick, he's like, well, no, you're not going to get your gun back, but this is a really important question because this actually comes into play later on in the episode. They hear a bunch of shots, and so they're forced to go back to the prison. Michonne has a hard time with a walker, actually, like, hurts her foot in some way. Carl does save her, though, and as this is happening, everybody takes out all the walkers in D block, I believe is what they mentioned. Lizzie and Mika's father was bit. All that there, I would say, you know, in terms of setting up Lizzie and Mika's storyline this season, was definitely really heartbreaking, just because, yeah, I'm not going to get into anything too personal, but just watching that scene specifically was really, really rough. Like, I think it definitely could have been done better, for sure. I think that there was just not as much emotion or realness of the situation there, but obviously, you know, like Lizzie and Mika, they're main characters, but their dad's not necessarily a main character, but still, I think you're having that a part of the story there. I think it should have been a bigger moment, but the bigger story there obviously was that Carol is trying to show everyone how to, you know, survive. And obviously not everyone's going to be able to, you know, adapt to that right away. Rick and Daryl, you know, them staring at each other during one of the scenes actually where they're trying to clear out the walkers. I noticed that because they were just like they're on the same level, you know, like it was so cool because in season 3, we didn't really see much of that. I guess there was some of that here and there, but it was very much just like, like Rick and Daryl's relationship was very much the same as it was in season 2, because Daryl was becoming more of a popular character. In season 3, I think that just kind of continued, and he just did things as Rick was saying. But in this season here, Daryl's becoming a much more popular character, and him and Rick are really on the same level here. And I mean, it's interesting because this is the beginning of season 4, and at the end of this season, Rick tells Daryl that he's his brother, right? So it's all building to that. But just a really cool scene there that I noticed that, I thought I would point out because it's Rick and Daryl, right? They do start to notice that people are dying on their own. There's no bites at all. So people are starting to die on their own. And eventually Herschel and everyone, they all come to the conclusion that everyone's infected with something. And they don't really know if people are coughing or this and that, but they know that everyone's infected, especially everybody in this cell block, right? And so they want to, keep away from everybody else. And so Maggie, Michonne, I believe there's other characters as well. They're going to be in a different cell block. Carol, Daryl, Sasha, Glenn, and Herschel all have a meeting about who's getting infected. And so they're trying to figure out exactly, where this is starting and all that. And this is really where Herschel shines. Like, Herschel becomes such an important character here during the storyline because obviously he knows a lot about medicine and illness and stuff in general. And so they're all trying to figure out who's getting infected. And it's just so cool to see a meeting like this because you have, 5 really popular characters. Obviously 3 characters are dead now, but it's just crazy because we don't get scenes like this. And I'm not really saying anything bad about the spinoffs at all because the spinoffs, obviously, that's the point of it. They focus more on individual characters, and whenever they eventually all reunite, then we'll get scenes like this, right? But I'm just, in terms of looking back at these older episodes, you just sort of took for granted back in the day scenes like this. Like, honestly, back then, the first half of season 4 or the first couple of episodes of season 4 really weren't like the best, at least for me personally. When I was watching it, I was like, this is all really boring. I know episode 5 I really liked, but then there was the governor episodes that I was just really not a fan of. And then I watched episode 8, and then 9, and then the whole second half of season 4 I absolutely loved. And so, in which a lot of people felt differently. A lot of people liked a lot of earlier season 4 stuff, but felt like the later half of season 4 was like the weakest part of the season, obviously until the end, right? So, but I just thought this was a really cool scene. Karen does start coughing though, and so they all start to notice that, and they're like, all right, Karen and David, they're going to be, put into a different place, and we'll just figure out what's going on here. Daryl and Carol actually talk in this scene. There's nothing really that happens, or, they just kind of talk about whatever, but I just wanted to mention it because I thought it was kind of a cool conversation. Carol in this episode obviously is really trying to get Lizzie and Mika, Carl, like everyone really, trying to teach them how to be strong and how to survive and all of that. But I feel like she's doing it way too harshly. Like, I mean, it's hard to say because that is the world that they're in. But everyone else's approach, I mean, I guess, again, it is very hard to say because I don't know if you can really teach anyone at that age to be able to survive. And obviously, I feel like Carol is she's caring in that way, right? Like, she's thinking about, like, the worst case scenario that, like, something bad could happen like this and that, and you need to be ready, which I totally understand. I just think that for a lot of people, it's shocking, but I think for Carol, she's been in situations like that, and she wants to be prepared herself, that I think she understands the whole situation well. And I think everyone there, Rick, like literally everybody, I don't think anyone was ready for Carol's mindset at the time here. Obviously, later on in season 5 and stuff, that like we saw that, like they totally understood what Carol was trying to do. But I think at this point here, it was just a little bit too much. Rick and Daryl actually talk about how great of a leader Rick is, or at least Daryl is saying that to Rick, and Rick's disagreeing because he's saying, I'm trying to do this and that. Carl is almost losing, who he was, this and that. And Daryl's just like, yeah, but, like whenever some stuff goes wrong, you're always there, and that's when walkers start to actually attack the walls. And this gets really intense because they almost lose one of their walls because the walkers are just really like they're pushing that fence down. And again, they notice that someone's been feeding the rats to the walkers and whatnot, so that was actually kind of interesting. The wall was almost coming down, but at this point Rick is like, all right, I'm gonna have to I guess give the pigs to the walkers, and that's gonna have to save everything here, which is what he did. And it was a really sad scene, but it's more proof that Rick can't hold on to the old world. Like literally everything that Rick tried to do was just completely falling apart. like everything in terms of all the crops and everything, you know, like everything was falling apart, and it's because of the walkers, and he can't do anything about that. He needs to focus on, you know, what they have there. And I think this was something that Rick, I think, struggled with a lot throughout the next, I don't know, however many episodes. I mean, really, it took a long time. I think all season he struggled with this until the point where he met Joe the Claimer, literally ripped out his throat. And I think after that moment is where he realized, I will do anything to survive. And I think that's where he became the most insane version of Rick Grimes for a long time, until Alexandria, where he sort of, you know, he settled down a little bit. And yeah, I mean, he's been on a journey. I mean, you could really follow the whole journey and be like, oh, he went here, here. Carol does ask Carl to not say anything. Carol, you know, obviously she's in a really crazy place right now because she's doing all of these things, and obviously with what happens with Karen and David, that just adds to it. So Carol asking Carl to not say anything. I mean, eventually Carl does go and tell Rick, which is like, I mean, I guess for Carl, that just, it makes sense. He's going to be honest with his father. And, you know, I just think that was probably the smart thing to do in that situation, because Carl, he doesn't understand everything entirely. And I think that, you know, he trusts his father more than he does Carol. So he has to tell his father about all of that, right? And I think Rick had the right response, which was, you know, he wasn't really going to say anything. The one thing I wanted to talk about too was actually the scene where Michonne is forced to hold Judith because she really doesn't want to. And obviously we know why, like we have that backstory, but I just thought it was really incredible because holding Judith allowed her to feel emotions that she's been holding back for a really long time now. And this was a big foreshadowing for her future, obviously, because Judith is her daughter now. Like, it's crazy. When you watch that scene, you're just like, I can't even believe it. But then we get to some of the last moments of the episode here where Rick does give Carl his gun again. In the very beginning of the episode, Carl asks Rick, can I have my gun? And Rick just kind of, you know, ignores it. At the very end, after all the walkers at the gates, after everything that happened here, Rick just gave Carl his gun. Rick also has his as well, and he's giving up on being a farmer now. You know, that world doesn't exist anymore, and Rick is now realizing how things are. And I just think that it's one of those things that when you look at the first 4 seasons, obviously the first season was more of a shock of what was happening. Season 2, it was just all about survival. Season 3, you found the prison. So it was the first place where you were like, you know what, maybe we can make this safe because we have walls and fences, right? It was the first place really that had it. And I think things were going good. I mean, if you look at Woodbury and what they dealt with there, they dealt with the governor. They got through that. So I really felt like Rick thought that this could be a really amazing place, right? I mean, we even learned with Alexandria and everything as well that it doesn't really work out that way. Like, even to this day, things are still like that. Like, they have the CRM and all that to help everyone with supplies, but how long is that going to last? You know, I feel like the new series with Rick and Michonne, whenever that comes out, is going to focus on some aspects of that, but it's not going to be as easy as that. And I do think there's going to be some downsides to that. Like, I really feel like I don't know. I feel like the CRM at some point is just going to be completely wiped out. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. But anyways, yeah, Rick realizes how things are. And then we get to the very last scene here where Tyrese finds Karen and David dead. And he's completely shocked. It's a big cliffhanger. And I remember when I first watched the scene, I was wondering who did that. I had no idea. And I was wondering if it was Carol. But I thought that it could have been somebody who was, you know, whoever was feeding the rats to the walker, because it just kind of made sense. Like, it had to have been the same person, right? Like, there's someone out there, maybe it's somebody within the prison. There's someone out there basically doing something. And this just doesn't seem like, you know, it would be someone from the group or anything like that. But I know in the next episode, you know, there's a lot of focus on Carol. And I think that, yeah, I'm just excited to watch that episode. So here's my breakdown for episode 2. I really enjoyed this episode. Big cliffhanger, obviously. And this was the episode where Rick decided he could not be a farmer anymore. And yeah, because it just doesn't work anymore in this world. But yeah, post all your thoughts down below on episode 2 of season 4 of The Walking Dead. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.